Okay, let's build this thing. So to start off this project, I am of course using my EVA foam that I got from Harbor Freight. I just like to use that stuff because it's relatively affordable and you get a lot of it. So I am just making a bunch of cylinders, and to make a cylinder, basically you're taking two circle shapes and flanking it with a rectangle. And here you can see me wrapping around those two circles with another layer, and I think this is 5mm EVA foam. Again, I'm not entirely certain about the thicknesses, I just use what I have. So this weird thing I got going on here, it's kind of like my idea of making symmetrical and evenly spaced out flutings, and it'll make a little more sense here. So I'm using my circle tool just to make some arch shapes, and here is the fluting. And before I forget, I wanted to mention that I sacrificed my foam roller as a structure. I know a lot of people will use PVC pipes, but I use my foam roller. So from there, I'm basically making it larger by extending the diameters by making these ring shapes. I'm just measuring what I have and I cut them to shape, and it looks something like this. Alright, so everything seems to be lining up correctly. Now I'm just using my box cutter to cut out those fluting shapes. I do my best to cover up the seams when I can, and it works out pretty good. Here I'm just using super glue to glue everything in place. I like to use super glue. I also use contact cement, and I try to limit my use of hot glue, mostly where places you don't really get to see. Okay, and that is the basic shape so far. The whole process is pretty repetitive. It's basically cutting out shapes, gluing them together, and repeating over and over again. So here's one detail piece that I need to make for the fluting. It's kind of like a reverse fluting shape, and it'll go here, and I just need to apply that to all the different areas too. And it's gonna look something like that. Okay, and then from here on out, it's basically trying to make that original foam roller larger. So I am cutting out more cylindrical shapes, and it kind of looks like couplings that you'd see from Home Depot or somewhere. But the basic idea is just make a bunch of cylinders. I'm sure a lot of people would love to know dimensions, but truthfully, I am just eyeballing it and using the objects that I have to measure it on site. And a similar technique that I did earlier, I'm just using paper to kind of mark out evenly spaced sections for more small details. Okay, now this is a fun part. I'm going to start making the barrels, and those barrels again are just thin rectangles. And I think these are 3mm EVA foam, if I'm not mistaken. Just something lighter than 5, definitely not 10, so something lightweight. If I had paper towel tubes, I'd definitely use those, but I don't have those on hand. But here's what the barrels look like so far. Okay, now the tips of the barrels are a little tricky because they aren't round, but they are hexagonal, I think. So here I made little channels on the inside which would bend into a nice corner. And they would look something like that. And these simply glue onto the barrels so we get that nice pentagon shape, but with the hexagonal barrel tips. Here's just another piece of that Harbor Freight foam. And now this circle has a slight beveled edge. Again, I don't rely on templates to make my stuff, but I do like to use paper to make mock-ups. So here is the curved portion of the prop where the fins of the shark come into play. As you can see, it's not the cleanest of things, but again, that's why we work with scraps first. Now, this is starting to look like a shark. I got the shark head, and now I need to make two halves to make one whole. Okay, I'll explain this more later on, but the barrels do move, and I basically took apart a drill that I got from Harbor Freight. The whole mechanism is basically a giant drill bit, and because it's EVA foam, it's lightweight, so the drill can support the weight. And it's a little wobbly, but I do have a way to mitigate that, but it works. So it's just a proof of concept. It's not perfect, but it definitely works. And here's the basic idea. This was actually the first time I tried to solder something together, and it worked out pretty fine. Here we have the motor, we have the rechargeable lithium-ion battery, and the wires. So the two halves of the shark head come together like this, and they need to be joined together with the top piece, which is kind of like a triangle. And again, being very careful to align my edges with contact cement. And it looks something like this. Okay, now this is the lower jaw, or upper jaw, depending on how you orient it. Okay, more circles. Ooh, you have no idea how many circles and rings and tubes I've made for this project. I was starting to go crazy. Oh look, another circle. So this is pretty cool. This is actually the turbines that are on the left and right side of the prop. I'm pretty proud of this turbine here because instead of making a dozen different pieces, it's all just one piece, and I angled the pieces with a heat gun. And here you can see me soldering some wires together. Pretty proud of it. It's not the cleanest, but I just learned some basic concepts, and I think I did a pretty okay job. Now I did run into some issues with the rotating turret, and I'll do my best to explain it here. So basically, the weight of the front of the bit, which this is basically a giant bit, it does want to droop a little bit, so I had to make a support structure that would hold it in place. So there is where the drill bit would go, and I have a cardboard support here, and I cover this part here with some more cardboard. And here I'm going to have the wire and circuit board run through the barrel handles, and I'll show a better video of that later on. So this is the front handle, and this is the housing for the circuit board. So this is the front handle, and I'm going to be feeding the wire through the middle, which was hollowed out. Okay, I know I'm jumping around a lot, but that's literally my process during this whole thing. I didn't really know what I was doing, and every time I had an idea for another part, I just kept on jumping back and forth. So here is the front fin part, and I just used strips of EVA foam to make more details, as well as cutting out circles. Here's some 2mm craft foam for details, and here is another look at the handle. So here I'm using a heat gun to make this PVC pipe more malleable, and that is actually going to be helping support the structure of the whole prop. There's the front handle and the back handle, and it's going to be something like this. So pretty lightweight, and the pipes are supporting the whole prop. Again, I'm using cardboard to make a hollow section so that the PVC pipe can rest nicely inside. Okay, so moving on to some more detail work, I need to make some horns for the Rhino portion. Again, just using EVA foam, making triangle shapes, and cutting them at an angle and heat forming them to make those curves. Just some 2mm craft foam details, and now I'm using a Dremel rotary tool to score in some teeth. Again, I could have made these individually, but I figured why not carve the teeth in and save some effort. I did use a bit of foam clay, and I made this army of balls here, and those are going to be some rivets. Again, a technique I like to use is using 2mm craft foam to make hand wraps, and it looks something like this. Some more PVC pipe, and again, there's a lot of handles on this prop, and they do skewer through the entire build, and that helps be supported. And this is what we got so far. I'm going to spray a layer of black PlastiDip, and then I'm going to start dry brushing on some color. So it looks something like this. Here I'm mixing up some colors of my own. I couldn't really find the perfect blue, so I just mixed turquoise and dark blues until I got something that I liked. And really, from this point on, it's really up to your own creative discretion on how you want to paint things. I like things to have more of a rustic feel, so I do a lot of dry brushing. Okay, now I am flip-flopping again, and I'm going to be talking about the front portion of the rotating barrel. I needed to make a floating structure for the barrel portions, and it's a little hard to explain, so hopefully showing you here will do a better explanation. So using a fidget spinner ball bearing, I do use it in order to help support the structure of the front piece. The fidget spinner allows it to freely rotate while being supported by the cardboard. Here's what the turbine looks like, coated in some black. This insulation pipe will come into play later on. Anyway, here's just some more paint, just some purples and blacks and grays. Just some more details with foam. I think this is the 3mm foam again, and I just used my technique of spacing out objects using that paper. And some more purple. And we're going to add in some more details too. The barrel is looking pretty good. Okay, so here I have the button hiding within the handle, and then here is where the drill bit goes. So I have this support ring resting on top, which has the fidget spinner ball bearing. Once seated, the barrel will freely rotate, and it works out pretty good. Again, just some more miscellaneous details. Here I'm using 2mm craft foam, and I just had white, but that's fine. I'll be painting it later on anyway. And from here on out, I am just doing a bunch of painting again, using brushes and acrylic paint. The whole build process, as I said, really is repetitive, and it just really takes more creative thinking on my part. It's just cutting out shapes of EVA foam, gluing them together, priming, and painting. I do need to make a few more pipes, so in this case I am using my EVA foam to make some pipes and carefully lining the edges with contact cement. I cut out some wedges and then we get this sort of curved shape. It's not perfect, but we're really not going to see those creases because we're going to be wrapping it with craft foam. Okay, and those are going to go here. And like I said, you're not going to see those ugly creases because we are going to covering them with 2mm craft foam. And it's going to look something like this. Again, I ran out of white, but I did have red for some reason, so I just used red. And what a surprise, more pipes. I have made so many pipes, it's ridiculous. I'm going to cover those there like this, and the other one goes there. And finally, that is going to rest on the bottom like this. All right, I need to make more pipes, but this time I'm going to be using a PVC pipe as a structure. Again, using some heat from a heat gun, I carefully bend it to a crude shape, and I get these two like this. Now, if you remember, I did show this insulation pipe, and that is going to be the pipes. Without the PVC pipe, it wouldn't be able to hold this shape, and that's why I used it. So you get the foam squishiness of the insulation pipe, but you get the structure of the PVC pipe. I need to make a few fin details, so starting off with paper, I then transfer it to thick EVA foam. I then bevel the edges very crudely, and then I come back with a rotary tool to sand the edges smooth. Very clean. And once again, we are back to painting. And if you couldn't tell, my whole process isn't a linear progress from step 1 to step 2. I'm always jumping back and forth because, well, whether it's not I couldn't focus or I just had more problems to fix, you know, so that's okay. And that's what that looks like so far. Here I'm adding too much paint and then wiping it off with a damp rag. And I'm doing it again here. Okay, then I need to add some little pink and turquoise details as per Jinx. And here we have the eye. It is semi-concave, or convex, I'm not sure which one. But I do my best to paint it a very light cyan. And then it's going to have a bit of a pop because of that curved nature. So that's going to go inside here. And I need to add more detail by adding more blue around the eyes. It's looking pretty good so far. The building's fun and all, but once you start painting, that's where the details really start to pop. And here, I really didn't follow a strict template or anything, I just did some Jinx stuff. Alright, so back to the front handle. It's still in this weird cardboard shape, and I have the wires feeding through. So what I did here is I used 2mm craft foam again, I made strips, and then I wrapped it like a bandage. Alternatively, you could use actual bandage or cloth-like material, but I didn't have any, and I just had 2mm craft foam, so I thought, why not? And then here I'm just using more foam to cover up the weird parts. That white part is actually over grip for a tennis racket. I play a lot of tennis and I had a spare, so I thought, why not use it? And again, I'm just adding some paint. And again, I'm adding some more details. And at this point, it's just a bunch of painting. So however style you want to go about it, I'm going for a cartoony look, and here's what it looks like. Okay, and here we are. It's really hard to fit on frame, but I think I got it. Actually, that would make a pretty cool thumbnail, I think. And now the trigger is up in this handle over here. So it still works. Now I'm sure this project caused more questions than answers, so please feel free to leave a question below in the comments and I will do my best to answer them. I hope you have a nice day. Till next time.